It's live or not. It looks like we are now live. Welcome in, everybody. Hello and happy Monday. Brian and Chris here, kind of making up our Tuesday show as I ended up inadvertently having a little extra babysitting duty that did not work out as well as I had hoped. If you guys saw the 3 minutes, it was constant, Gabe playing some Super Mario Brothers and whatnot. But I'm also still recovering. My voice, I lost it this weekend. That's what happens sometimes when I get sick. But thankfully, I was able to crush it over at the Comedy Arena for a live show. My brother, Brandon, got to come. And he said that I did a really, really good job. So if I trust his review, but we'll be posting that up over on Ginger Prime Comedy as I'm downloading the official stuff. We got so much to talk about. Chris, before we do though, you've got some big plans this week. You got some big plans. So let's break it down for everybody. What do you got coming up on stream? What are you working on?
Yeah, so I'm taking Monday off of stream to try to catch up on the podcast stuff with Hours in Archives so that that's in a good state, because this week is patch 6.4. And 6.4, every raid, I've kind of had like a different objective in kind of what makes me better understand that aspect of the game. And so my goal this week is to clear P9S week 1. My goal last tier was to just be willing to go in first one. So like for people that fully clear the tier in a short number of weeks, I understand this may not be like a wildly inspirational milestone, but as somebody that went through a lot of years of this game, not even touching Savage, I'm just taking each tier and going a little bit further. So the goal of this tier is to get my P9S clear week 1, which means that tomorrow I'll be crafting my own set, pentamelding my own set, and then pushing into Party Finder.
Nice, man. Going with the PF clears. What rocking the Warrior?
Warrior, absolutely.
There we go.
Absolutely.
All right, man. This is gonna be exciting. This is gonna be the first raid series that I've been gonna be sitting out. So it's gonna be nice to kind of be able to kind of live vicariously through you and raiding and see how far it goes. So what time are you starting?
Servers go live bright and early. So bright and early.
Bright and early. Storied focus first, or just right into the raid?
I don't think I need to clear the story to get to everything I need to get to. So I would probably say hold off on the story and go straight into crafting and melding and start focusing on raid. So it'll be spoiler free. We may take a break from P9S stuff later in the week and try to get it clear. I like to usually have a general taste of the patch within the Tuesday to Friday that it comes out. So sometime between Tuesday and Friday, I'll go through that story stuff, but it won't be right away. That way, if anybody wants to come hang out, it'll be spoiler free day 1.
Perfect. Coming up for this week and me tomorrow morning is the Blue Protocol 7.0. What they name their live letters in this kind of format where you have a major and a minor. So it's in an interesting kind of difference from Final Fantasy where it's just always incrementing. Imagine if like the 6.0 live letter or the 6.4 was it's 6.1 and then 6.2 or something like that, where they're kind of in step with kind of being able to do kind of minor live updates, etc. We'll see if they end up keeping that going, in that. Now Magic Moose Moo over on
Savage is next week, by the way. So like this week's prep. So I'll be in normal tomorrow, just in case I wasn't clear there. For anybody that doesn't remember, there's a Savage delay this expansion.
Yes. And then Magic Moose Moo says, do you like the tier 3 armor sets that they've showed off?
Glimmer's not like my go-to, so I like some of the variety that's coming this patch. There's like a casual set that's tied to something, and I think it's an interesting move that they put some of the glows on Savage this expansion, but like I'm not the guy that has like a wildly pronounced opinion on any of the armor.
You're either a pig,
the pig was the first time I saw something I was like, I have to have that glamour, and then I switched to it and I haven't touched anything since.
Yeah, absolutely. They so I got the Blue Protocol stuff coming up. We've got more Throne and Liberty information coming out, and that's going to be kind of one of our main topics on today's show, because really interested in Chris's take on it, because it's the internet. Clearly people are either like okay with what we're going to share today as kind of one of the main topics, or absolutely pissed that it even exists. So Chris plays a lot of mobile games, so that's going to come into the conversation here. But that also, the Korean beta launches this week for Throne and Liberty. I am not in the Korean beta, but several other content creators are. And what I've been saying leading up to this week is we're going to know. Like, the Throne and Liberty has been a massive mystery, but at some point, like that mystery has to be solved. And this week, I think people are going to start to see whether this game lives up to their, imagination, or, if this is actually like a real game that has, real systems and challenges and things like that. So coming up also on the channel and coverage in June, Summer Games Fest, we're going to see a lot of MMO news. We're going to see a lot of Final Fantasy 16 news. And if you guys have been paying attention to your feeds today, many content creators who got to fly out to London all had the embargo released. So lots of Final Fantasy 16 information for your feed. So that either means go nuts and consume it, or avoid YouTube today. Like, it really depends on what your approach is with Final Fantasy 16. But I'm very much looking forward to that here in less than 30 days. It's one official month to launch officially today. So I think that means some interesting things for State of Play, perhaps. Who knows? Maybe a beta or a demo. I guess that'd be the correct word, demo. All right. Chris, anything else that you wanna touch on before we get into our main topic?
No, it's been just a pretty standard week, and the second half of the year is so exciting for MMOs. Like this year, we've got BlizzCon and FanFest, and WoW's punching, and Guild Wars is punching, and it just feels like everything's heading in a positive direction. So I assume somewhere you're going to bring up some drama.
Well, I mean, it's all a matter of how people perceive drama, right? Because at its core, Throne of Liberty is an MMORPG, PC, console. It's also got the ability to stream to mobile phones. It's not a mobile phone native, but immediately you start making people make connections to mobile. One of those systems that they have in place is a auto kind of battle and an auto kind of pathing system in the game itself. Now it's set up where you have more kind of strategic control over that system. You can tell your character where you want to go, kind of farm enemies. You do have to have the materials required to stay alive, because if you're doing auto farming, you're not, you're doing it efficiently. It's not like you're just, hey, here's me actually pressing buttons and winning. It's basically, here's me auto attacking, auto farming. And if I don't have enough materials that will keep me healed up, you're going to eventually die. So it ends up kind of having kind of more of a preparatory gaming experience. But with any auto battle, obviously people make comparisons to mobile games, and thus are now vastly concerned about Throne of Liberty as an MMORPG. Where do you fall on this? What do you want to
know? With the auto battle stuff, I don't know who they're trying to appeal to. I think there's going to be people that want that mythic savage challenge mode rating experience where they're trying to compare this to some week one nightfall of Destiny, and this game just looks like it's not going to have that. And so they're going to be, upset if they had kind of tied their hopes to other parts of this MMO looked really good, but because of that choice, I think it kind of pollutes the water for people that like that level of challenge, if that's exclusively the way they like to play. On the other hand, we're seeing, mobile has really grown almost independent of standard gaming. And so it does feel like at some point we needed there to be some bridges. At some point there had to be a bridge between, the Diablo actual games and Diablo Immortal. Diablo Immortal's all the way over here, and everything that's good and bad about it, mostly bad, but imagine it had been good, just hypothetically for a moment. There'd be no way to bridge those people in. Imagine somebody downloaded it and liked Diablo Immortal and said, is there a way to play this more substantially? And then you just invited them to Diablo 2, and it would just be what the hell? I don't know how to do any of this. So it makes sense to me that auto battlers, this isn't the first game that's had auto battlers. We've even tried some MMOs over the time covering the channel that have had auto battlers. It just how far is that going to go? And how much does that represent of your actual core gameplay?
Well, to set some context for you, if you try to set yourself up for auto fighting characters that are your level, you'd be dead within a couple of minutes. You're not, that's not anything you're going to do that is anywhere efficient or playing itself. You're going to need to set up some kind of plan for hey, I'm level 30. I'm going to go auto fight in this zone that's maybe level 20 zone, etc.
Does it run all the time? Is the theory that my character's running 24/7? So EVE Online, your character's doing something 24/7. Mm-hmm. There is this back process. It's nowhere near as important as what you do actively when you're logged on a day-to-day basis, but over many years, you have to have a plan for where your character learns. And so your skill tree is just growing in real time. So you might have a skill that takes 7 days to train. and you can line up, you can line up a certain number of days of training. Like, is that what we're looking at?
That and like farming materials. You can go in and specifically say like, I only want this kind of material. I don't want, like, drops from the enemies, etc. So in terms of skills, and yes, like you are kind of in a way doing kind of a bigger, longer grind because of this system. And so that's where I've kind of fallen into this kind of, I'm going to give it a shot. Like I don't know if I don't like it. I'm not necessarily excited that a game plays itself, because there's a part of me that's like, no, I should play the game. But the other side of my brain goes and says, I've been playing these online games for over 20 years. There's always been people who've been auto playing and auto botting and auto farming that I'm always competing against. Is this just a democratization of that system and kind of giving everybody like, it's not efficient. You're not going to, like, this isn't how you really play. But for those of you who have lives and work and things like that, because I've theorized an evolution of the MMO is going to be AI driven, where the system learns you, and then like, hey, if you're online, Chris, and I'm stuck at work, you and I can still adventure together, and I can come along, my AI version of me, and then when I sign in, then I'm taking actually over control, and now I'm going to bring some level of efficiency here. I'm wondering if this is kind of that step in that kind of direction, in terms of it, where it becomes a strategy. But here's the real kicker, though. I work from home. Having the system on, the game on, playing itself when I don't, because I'm not using this computer, the majority of time while I'm at work, what's to stop me from just like, all right, it's just going to be on. And what's to stop that from then displaying in terms of player numbers on Steam? Because if the game is playing itself,
that's not my issue.
I'm just saying it presents an interesting
argument. That's an
right.
embed argument.
Oh, it is. It's all that, right? Like it's 100% that.
That doesn't matter. What my concern as a everyday player is, you as somebody that works from home and has an ultra wide, can you have the game running off to the side and you click on it every 23 minutes when it asks you to, as part of your Pomodoro or Sprint or whatever methodology you're using to work? And now, because I've made the grave mistake of working somewhere other than at my exact computer, I'm never going to catch you. Right? Like, am I going to come back and you're just going to have all this wealth, which then further promotes something like, now I have to go like RMT to catch you, like because you have 86 billion resources, because you've been. So like, that's why I asked, like, can I pre-schedule it 7 days in advance? Is this like the island expeditions in 14?
I don't know how detailed, but I've been told that it's like, it does have some impressive, kind of strategy, and you kind of control how your player does it. And to answer Yammer's question, it's all player control. Like, you play and you can control, and you're actually going to be way more powerful, like to a 100th degree than the auto system, because you can use skills, you can get out of battle.
But a bottom wow is richer than me.
Right. So then this comes down to a great economic question, right? Because if I can only auto battle and get those materials, the wealth, I think, is going to be in gathering. And then you'll see people try to bot the gathering side of the thing. But the game in and of itself, from a gathering methodology, you're not auto running around like, cutting down trees, etc. So, unless I'm mistaken about that, like, I think what you end up seeing is that kind of thing just is going to keep those materials and those kind of things price-wise on the market very low. So I don't think it's going to be a substantial amount of wealth, because it's not like I'm cheating the game. The game offers this to me, and it's not like, like those. If everybody's just farming that zone, you come back in, and I think that gives you more buying power, because the market's flooded with people who are just like, well, I farmed this, and now it's not worth that much. And so then I don't know necessarily if you'd be at a disadvantage if you chose not to use the system overall. Would I make more progress? Yes. But I don't think if I was actively playing the game, would I make more progress than you? Clearly. What do you think?
I think that if Final Fantasy XIV had buffed the retainer system to where it brought back tomes or savage level loot or destined slotted gear on patch, like week 1, my retainers could bring that back, saying, well, it's available to all players, would not at all make even a dent in why people were upset.
Yeah.
Level of access is not the issue.
Well, level access is an issue, but you're conflating it to the hardest end game stuff as opposed to like, okay, so I have a retainer that goes out and gets me like 100 more potions than you. You know, that's like we need to talk about it in terms of scale, right? Like if the game is going to play the hardest level of content, I'm with you 100%, but we haven't seen a game that goes and does that. The only way we see that is in PvP in 14, where people have these systems and these hacks that make them, god tier better than anybody else.
Okay. Island Sanctuary works because it's not really that mandatory. It's wildly cosmetic. It works in like racing games that you can have them auto race because your progress is not affecting other players. The hard part of letting this overtake MMOs is like, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
Because if there's an advantage to it, there will be people that push that to its very limit, and those people will have, right? So like if in testing, you're like, well, our devs that did it only got 5% more. That's not what's going to happen when you let 50 million gamers
in. 50 million people. Let's go.
There's going to be 1,000 people out of that 50 million that just break it. So like those are more where my questions lie, is like, how much does it affect actual kind of gameplay? How much does it start to feel mandatory? And if it does feel mandatory, is it fun? Is it fun for the players that they're targeting to auto battle? Because if it's not, then it's just going to be something that's frustrating requirement.
Well, especially because, everybody's going to kind of approach this differently. The theory that I have, again, I'm not yay auto battle. I'm like, let's give it a shot, because the common complaint within MMORPGs is bots, right? I think 14 handles bots the best, because every week they put out like a bot killing report. Like, hey guys, we got these many reports. This is what we've investigated. We have suspended or canceled or, removed these different accounts. Other games don't do that. And I think that's a kind of a big weakness of that aspect. So I'm guessing it takes a lot of work and effort, but bots exist in all online games. And now I'm wondering, like, when I ask, like, what's the solution? Nobody really has one. And I'm all for a marketplace of ideas. They don't. Like, when you ask somebody, like, how do you get rid of the bots? You just get rid of them. Like, that's not a solution. Like, how do you actively, get these systems in? And maybe AI is going to be a way of kind of helping to solve that. But then you hear the same kind of stories of, like, I was just playing this game really efficiently and I got banned. It's like, okay, well, were you botting or were you not? Like, there's so much that we just cannot know or see. And this in and of itself is like, if we bring it to the people, like, is this ended up being a positive solution, negative solution? The only way to really try it is to try it in this regards. And that's why for a marketplace of ideas, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? You don't like the game? Okay, guess what? There's another 100 other MMOs on the way. Maybe they'll learn from that, or we'll take it into account when we see how it actually works in the real world this year. What do you think?
I do think bot detection's come a long way. I think that from when World of Warcraft first released to now, like Warden and all that, like I think that anti-cheats have come a long way, and we have some things that we like and don't like. There are a lot of people for very good reasons that are against kernel level anti-cheats. And I don't think at any point has any of the suggestions been, let's make it native. So like, it feels like a weird thing to be like, well, the cool thing about this is that you won't have to worry about botters spotting because everybody can bot. Like, that feels like a weird take on it. And doesn't that just make the botters even more efficient? Don't they just spin up the account and just like, wow, now I don't even have to write bot software that does the botting. I just have to write bot software that just deploys the native botting. So like, it doesn't, I don't see how this is a solution that we look back and we're like, wow, I really learned a lot and I'm really glad for that. Like, I see a lot of ways this goes wrong.
Yeah.
But as you said, the worst they can do is ruin their game, which has nothing to do with me.
It doesn't impact anything else. And if it's a bad system and it's like, nope, that didn't work out well. Okay, cool. There we go. Now we've seen what it looks like at scale. Does it actually work? Now, Labad Chakra says, so auto battle is basically if AI took over your character to farm zones, but only used auto attack, no mounts, and then you can take control, unuse the mounts, and your full skill rotation. Yes. Like, in any point during the auto combat, you can either pick up the controller or the mouse and keyboard, and then you kind of just resume and take over that fight and win or lose. And the question that I have about also with this is that this seemingly is a PvP game, where Like when a boss spawns, it will tell you, hey, the zone is transitioning from a safe zone to now a PvP zone. I'm wondering if in terms of that, like, or if you're in a zone and it transitions while you're auto farming, if that doesn't just give other players kind of more license to say, hey, well, we've got a wealth of auto farmers out there to go and beat up on. Because the other side of botting is when you have games that don't allow for open world PvP, there really isn't much you can do besides report them. There could end up being some kind of fun gameplay moment of hunting down people who are auto farming all day long, and who knows, that could actually turn into some interesting content for some YouTube, some aspiring YouTubers out there to create if that ends up being the case. What do you think?
I would just have to be shown. I don't see it. I don't see where it's advantageous. I see a lot of ways this ends either not exciting or actively badly.
Yeah.
So it just, like, unless it's something where like that's the replacement for the retainer system or the WoW mission table, or like unless it's like, okay, well, this is something that all characters are doing at all times regardless, and it's just a component of it that like your character is meant to be in this persistent world, and so they're even on when you're not on, but that's happening by default, and it doesn't become something where like download our mobile app and check in every 16 and a half minutes.
Yeah.
Like that's going to end up being like, cool. Like it rewards the people that know life or have some sort of AI know lifing for them. And everybody else can just screw off, I guess. So it starts to feel like it would be built into some social media platform as like a retention mechanic, and less like something that would be done because it's fun.
And then that's gonna tie right into, again, the numbers and the charts, because if you can and you're using that system where you're letting the game kind of farm for you while you're sleeping and offline, that's going to throw off all kinds of numbers in the game. Because when it comes down to what are the active players, we see this in Lost Ark all the time, where in Lost Ark it's like, oh, and they have 200, 300, concurrent players, and like what percentage of that is actually just people who are botting the game? We do, you can only speculate, and you can kind of know, and you can kind of get hints at when the game goes offline as to when it does an update and breaks the bots and all that stuff, where you kind of see another level of number come in for a while, and then eventually as they fix whatever broke in their botting, then you see that spike back up, which is it's mildly entertaining, because the internet is it's no source of opinions online, so it's always fun. Now, Janik says, I read on Reddit that if you can only auto battle mobs level 5 below yours, and if that's what you read, Janik, just FYI, that was a mistranslation on Reddit from my video. You can auto battle same level enemies as you. You will die probably within minutes, if not sooner, because you're not going to dodge. You're not going to get out of bad. You're not going to be using your skills, and they probably will end up shredding you pretty quickly. Solid says, any kind of auto battle system just screams our game is a chore. Here, make this slightly more bearable. What do you think about that? Because this is an interesting perspective. This is almost becomes down to respect your time versus respect your investment. Having it as a required to be able to compete would feel pretty awful, but having it as an option for people to take part in, to kind of, I guess, experience more of the world, it's a fine, weird line to walk. I'm not gonna try to sell it in this case. It's a fine, weird line to walk. What do you think?
There's an entire there's entire genres of survival and simulation games that letting the game play itself for a brief part of it is actively part of the fun. And so if you're playing The Sims or Sim City or Dwarf Fortress, or like there is,
I don't know if you lost him or if y'all lost me.
I'm still here.
Oh, dang, it's down to 1 bar.
Okay.
I don't know if we lost you or you lost me.
Right, I think. Here.
Okay, cool.
I have not dropped.
Cool. Well, I'm assuming that it was continuing to work and the bars are coming back up. So, all right, we're established. That was that was random. Do you want to go and repeat what you said just so I can hear it?
So there's an entire set of genres of games tied to simulation, survival, and so on that are like literally built for this. So letting Sim City play, letting The Sims play, letting Dwarf Fortress play is part of the fun. So saying an auto battle system on its own is a chore is not necessarily true. There are times that that's part of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I have yet to see an MMO where that is not used to justify, we've made it so grindy, but don't worry, the game's going to just play part of it for you. So like, I'm willing to believe that auto battle on its own is not a flawed feature. I just haven't seen anybody put it into a live service multiplayer online RPG game.
Yeah.
And not tie it to selling auto progress, encouraging a certain amount of player retention, tying behind certain levels of player resources or power or both, bypassing a system that was so poorly designed that they thought players would play it. And then they're like, oh crap, I guess we should just play it ourselves because they're not going to do it. It's always been the answer to a problem instead of like just adding fun to the game. Letting Dwarf Fortress run constantly is fun. So like, how do you get that in an MMO?
Yeah. My preference would be more like party members, that are AI driven, than essentially the game, being auto driven. But we have yet to see that outside of Final Fantasy 11 to a degree. And in Final Fantasy 11, it still makes me wish that we would have like the Gambit system, for your party members to kind of just travel along with you. And then you can make kind of the open world as grindy as you want, because with a party of 4 people, whether they're friends or they're, trust companions, the enemies go down pretty quickly. But if you want to go and make it as grindy as you want, then you just choose not to take, the AI, which is going to make it a little bit slower. So you then have control of your difficulty. And that's one of the things that's always been appealing about the RPG, especially like I'm almost done playing the Final Fantasy original classic pixel remaster. And you can really make that game as difficult as you want. Especially when it comes down to like your party and what you choose to take into battle and the different, cost benefit analysis that you get in that single player. And it's kind of hard to translate that into a multiplayer because other people, not everybody wants the same experience. Not everybody wants that challenge, or not everybody wants it to be so easy, in that regards. So that's just something interesting to kind of think on. We'll have to wait and see how it is received, because the game looks like it's going to be launching sometime this fall. And beyond that, we'll be getting some actual hands-on with the beta. Most likely that announcement for the global beta will be coming June 8th on this case. So it's going to be interesting to see. So yeah, I want to now transition over to our next topic, because Chris, you were talking to me about how WoW Classic is getting a hardcore mode, or like and something like that. So why don't you break that down? What does that mean?
So hardcore has existed in games for a long time. The idea that death is permanent. There are a lot of games out there that make dying part of it. There are even games like Dwarf Fortress where dying is fun becomes a slogan of the game. But there is an element of like, once people get so good at a game that can add replayability to watching hardcore runs, or even progressing to the point that you see no hit runs in some games where you never get struck by an enemy the entire clear, becomes part of adding that challenge and adding that mastery to it, where the game just didn't have a difficulty high enough to satisfy those players. MMOs have not historically been something that have had a large kind of hardcore basis, as opposed to something like ARPGs or something. But here we are. And so the World of Warcraft community has been like, it's been ever present for a long time, but in recent months, it has blown up, where there is an entire community surrounding this. So now we're moving into massively multiplayer RPGs instead of just standard RPGs like Pokemon. Pokemon's a great example of kind of what do you do if a Pokemon faints? Like, do you have to let it go? And so, or like different restrictions on how many pets you can catch per zone and things like that to just add difficulty. So this community's kind of popped up, and they've added all sorts of different variations on it. So there's just, if you die, you restart and that's it. But then there's also restrictions on, you can't interact with the auction house, or, you can't party with other players, or whatever the restriction may be. And that just adds more and more layers to hardcore. The devs of Classic have now come out, and one of them has said that World of Warcraft is interested in bringing hardcore Classic servers online. Their initial phrasing is basically like, all those variations make it way too muddy. They love that that's community driven. So what they'd like to do instead is they just want to add the base rule in that if you die, your character is done. You'll come back as a ghost, so that you don't have to delete your character in case like your character's like the leader of a guild or something. Like, that creates a lot of weird social dynamics if the character just gets deleted automatically. So you can come back as a ghost, but you can't ever resurrect. That's it. You're done. It's been really addicting to watch. I've been watching people do high-end max level rating in Classic in groups that are all hardcore players, which is just really intriguing to watch people doing Molten Core, and then like a priest goes down in a boss fight in a group of 40, and afterwards everybody's like, oh my gosh, because that person lost days and days of progress. They probably lost 14 days of playtime or something on that character or something silly, which would just be painful to watch that go away. So it's exciting. This is in addition to them bringing out some other variation of Classic. They know they don't want to call it Season of Mastery, but for now I don't have like a better stand-in name. But ideally, there's been some speculation. What if they had Classic progress beyond Classic without going into Burning Crusade? What if they came back and added different variations to things? What if they made small changes to the game and kind of, breathed life into it the same way you would see an action RPG breathe life into a season, where there's a reason to play because it's a little bit different this time. This is where you get like possibly more of an ongoing community, something like old school RuneScape, where the community kind of votes on what they want to change, or you get something like a Diablo style game or Path of Exiles that the devs have an idea of a flavor for the season. Then each season, the community kind of gives feedback on how well that flavor was received. Either way, it's exciting to see that be the case, because that's something that I think, in a world where it feels like the movies have just stopped coming out with new ideas some months and are just going to only just re-release old ideas. This says like re-releasing old ideas doesn't mean the end of creativity. It doesn't mean the death of creativity. You can still have something that breathes this back. And so for many of us that have seen them, all these remakes, remasters, reforges, relaunches, whatever you want to call them, just upping the graphics isn't enough. So I don't know that it needs to be as transformative as Final Fantasy VII, but it would be nice as you start to go back, as you talk about these pixel remasters, the ability to kind of scale that difficulty. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Like as we right now, everybody's talking about Zelda. How many people do you think have beaten the original Zelda that came out in like the late 80s?
I've beaten it.
I beat it half a dozen times or more. Yeah. But re-releasing that in an interesting way beyond just a pixel remaster, how would that be received?
I think in terms of game preservation, that would be amazing. In that regards, that you have that as an option. You can still play the original difficulty, or you can, as a player now, can change it up, and it just gives you those kind of options. I appreciate that the pixel remasters have done that for me for this collection, but also have taken it with the 16:9 view, like how they really put that love and care into it. It really kind of, I think, shows. And I'm so glad that Square-Enix has taken the time to do that. And I think the ultimate would have been them putting it into the 2D HD Octopath Traveler style engine, because I'd love to see like that level of visual fidelity brought to these games. But now that we have that as kind of a preservation, I think that hopefully gives them more license to do more things like that. Now, back to the ultra hard mode for PvP. So the question is how does that work in with PvP? Like, are these PvP servers, like, are you running around and, hey, we're all flagged for PvP. I got no choice. Now I'm dead. Is that the case?
So there's definitely the ability to grief other players. There's definitely all sorts of mechanics that they're going to have to address, as far as like what happens if somebody's dragging monsters into somebody and then feigning death so it attacks them. But already out of the gate, you can tell they're starting to address that, because one of the things you can do with another player is you can duel them, and you just go till one player hits one life. But they are adding something called Duel to the Death, which I think is really exciting and really high stakes. So I cannot imagine what happens if you have people, if they can line up tournaments or something where you have 40 people enter and only one is going to come out the other side. What does that look like? That starts to take, because the PvP grind back in the day was really epic because none of us knew what we were doing. Mm-hmm. But what it became is when Classic launched, it turned out that people could optimize the fun out of anything. And so I think this would add a lot of that back, to see a grand marshal or something on a server, and they're a grand marshal of like the gladiators. And so I think there's some really exciting things they can add as they kind of explore things like Duel to the Death. There absolutely is the ability to kill other players in the wild, whether you're on PvP server or not. So that is something that I think is part of it. You also have like what happens if there's a disconnect. So it's not going to be for everybody. It's the same thing as a deep dungeon. Like there are some people that just cannot handle the idea of like, well, what if I disconnect on floor 77? Then you disconnect on floor 77. Like I don't. Right. It feels like you answered your own question. Like we all feel bad and it sucks, but there's not a solution. Like that's the nature of this. So it's not going to be the majority of the player population. I think that's why it's important that they say this is in addition to another mode. It's not the other mode.
It's not the other mode. Yeah.
We would like to do both of these things because we think it'll be really exciting to watch. It would be like adding, like there's been some people that have called for like the world first race to take place on its own server, to just take the top 10 or 100 teams or whatever and just go put them on their own server. And I think that, it would change the race, like just kind of thinking that through. So this is kind of saying that it's like, what if we just let the hardcore players do that on their own hardcore server? Because when I watch some of these videos that are griefing, what's really frustrating right now is hardcore is a mode you opt into with an add-on and things like that. But the people that grief you, they don't have to be hardcore. So if you kill them, they can just come back. As opposed to on a hardcore server, I will say, while people can grief, if they mess up, their character's deleted. So the idea that some level 45 or 50 rogue comes and harasses you, if you do beat them, they're done.
They're going to restart.
And that's kind of cool.
Would you like to see this kind of system in play on Final Fantasy servers, like as an option?
I don't know that 14's really laid out well for it, but I assume that some of the other Final Fantasy games have been. You would have to tell me whether or not you think 11 would be a good fit for something like this. It sounds pretty intense because my understanding is 11 could get pretty dangerous. So can Classic. Watching people clear on Nixia, all the trash and clear on Nixia without anybody going down was awesome. It was awesome because I know how easy it is to lose people in there. Watching people go into Molten Core and expect nobody to die was awesome. But like, I just don't know that 14's really set up for it. I think a complex gearing system helps. The ability to say like, you can level past this range really quickly, but there is this piece of gear that's really good. If you get it to drop, that's great. In hardcore mode, you're going to slow down and get that gear before moving on. That doesn't really exist in 14. Like you're just kind of like hanging out in the gear that's dealt to you. You're just hanging out with the abilities that are dealt to you. And like, I don't know. It just doesn't sound that exciting. So saying Horizon 11 has a hardcore mode. Yeah. Like that seems like a better fit.
Well, and that's obviously community driven. And when it comes to like Final Fantasy 14, like I'm not saying and advocating that they turn that on for everybody, but it's like, it'd be interesting to say we've spun up this special server and it's got its own special rules. And it doesn't necessarily need to even be PvP driven. Because one of the things I thought it would always kind of be neat is because we talked about how the open world is dangerous in Final Fantasy 11. Like it is a place that like it was designed for grouping up in the open world together. And it would be neat to see if they're like, well, you know what, we're gonna let you put your mouth, your foot where your mouth is, and say, do you really want this kind of play in 2023 in Final Fantasy 14? Here's a special server that it's like, no, you're not going to go out and solo any of these enemies in the open world. You want to bring friends, and just to see what kind of culture would be surrounded around that. Like, what would that do with that server, and would it be full enough that people would be interested in taking part? What do you think?
I think one of the other things that's been asked of the WoW community is they've said, instead of a hardcore mode, something that might be more widely appealing is what if they made a nightmare mode of the world? Nightmare, of course, referring to the increased difficulty in the Diablo worlds where you have world tiers. I think that would be a better solution for Final Fantasy 14. I don't know that the world is scary to be in by myself. So saying I have to bring friends, like I don't have to bring friends now and I could go without dying. So I would prefer them to say, what if we had an extreme and a savage difficulty of the world? I think that would be more exciting. And I would love to see that in 14.
Right, because it wouldn't even have to be like
play back through on New Game Plus.
Mm-hmm. And like even to the degree of like, if we're just kind of like taking different options, okay, yeah, your character doesn't get deleted, right? We're not talking about that, but just having that aspect of the open world is going to push back on you, so that if you wanted to see what like kind of the Final Fantasy 11 players have talked about, where from a culture perspective, one of the things that like it's called like kind of forced empathy. It's like you see your friend, you're like, oh, this guy died and I want to res him because that's going to actually save him time. and save him experience, because when I died, I lost experience. And so maybe not like I deleted this character, but maybe like back to the, you leveled
That's
down.
Eureka Bozja, right?
Yeah, it's a 100% Eureka Bozja, but in the entire world, like from the get-go, when you're stepping out into Limsa or Gridania or Ulda, like into those fields, and it's like, that fight was close. That was okay. Hey, you random person, we can survive this much better, much faster, and having that efficiency come in a way of breaking down those barriers again, like as a single server option, to see if people like truly want that. Because a lot of people like me talk a big game. We talk a big game. We're like, yeah, that's what I want. But then a game does that and we don't show up for it. And then you hear people make excuses. I see the same excuses made in the PvP community. Oh, this is going to be the game that really like brings everybody together and it's PvP focused. And we've been wanting this all the time. And the game comes out and they're like, well, it wasn't perfect. So that's why the numbers are low, because it wasn't perfect. It's like, yeah, we knew it wasn't going to be, but we do know that like probably 100 to 1, if not 1,000 to 1, people prefer PvE over a PvP MMO. And that there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that whenever I talk to the PvP players out there, that they have an inflated sense of representation, maybe is the right word. I don't know at the end of the day. I just think it's crazy. Cosmos says 14 does not have the combat for a hardcore mode. What do you think?
I mean, I think that watching people clear top without a healer tells me that like there is different levels of people playing the game. I just don't know that the system feels good enough for that. So I would rather them go back and I think they do have the combat system to better lean into like higher difficulties. I just don't know that death is the right penalty to like decide is the great decider. I would rather see them say, can you clear something without getting any vulns or any damage downs? Can you clear something minimum item level? Like, I think there are better restrictions than death. I just don't think that's their best foot forward as far as like, if I were to measure a person who has a higher caliber of play at 14 and maybe even some luck, I just don't know that death is the right decider. As opposed to something like Mario, where like death is definitely the right decider. Like death is the ultimate decider. So playing through Mario with no death, that you're like, wow, that's immediately impressive. Somebody saying, I played through all of Realm Reborn without dying. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that when we talk about it, like I do think it has the combat, for that kind of hardcore mode of the world pushing back on you. You look at all the instance-based content, it's designed, it's balanced, it understands that there's going to be more than one person. Final Fantasy XIV's open world, as opposed to like 11's or like the older classic MMOs, is designed around whatever class you are, whether you're a white mage or, like a mighty warrior, both are the same healers. Whether you're one of those, you should be able to clear and be able to survive in the open world so that you can get to the destination, the quest, and then the instance content being that we know that it's balanced with 4 people or 8 people in mind, we can then have a content that scales to that. Now, I think the instance content that exists has only gotten easier for the older content, but still, I think the battle system, they could have a rule set where all the enemies in the open world are balanced for 4 people at a minimum or something like that, so that it does challenge you from a solo perspective. If you went in at a level 16 in, Toto Rack or something like that, those enemies would put up a fight and you would feel, if not dead, challenged, so to speak. What do you think?
I don't know that the 14 combat system really lends itself to that from early on. Like when I watch level 15 gameplay in World of Warcraft Classic Hardcore, it's exciting to watch. I don't actually feel that way about 14. Mm-hmm. Like I like 14, and I think that 14 is like a great way to welcome in somebody who's never played an MMO and stuff for a lot of the same reasons I'm describing here. But like for the fact that they're both tab, target, global cooldown games, I just don't know that the combat system in 14 is intriguing at low level. Like, can you die? Absolutely. But that doesn't make the act of not dying like worth working towards.
So then, because like Framsey says that he wouldn't really want them to waste the resources on these kind of systems or server or something like that, would a better investment being kind of refining that leveling and that combat experience? Because we've talked about this in individual videos before about that early game, balance, that early game feel, especially as it relates to job and monetization and combat, depth. Would that be would you rather, like, if you were kind of agreeing with Framsey on a resource perspective, would you rather see them invest in the combat system itself as just like, theoretically spending Square-Enix's dollars here?
I'd rather see the Unreal system be something where those fights don't come around one time and never again. They said those were going to repeat. They haven't done that. They've yet to repeat. So, like, I would love to see that instead be something where it's like, hey, cool, we're picking up 2 or 3 things in Unreal each time. Hey, did you notice that starting in Shadowbringers, that stuff comes around into Unreal like literally one expansion later? So, like, all current stuff is Unreal, and then just like Duty Support, it just slowly catches up so that we just have more and more and more Unreal content. Like, I would rather them pile the difficulty into the replayability element of 14 than try to spend a bunch of time spinning up a whole new mode. And I base that on the fact that, like, New Game Plus sounded like something that took them an enormous number of resources to do, and then it turned into something that had so few applications. Like, it's not like a way I can level up alts. It's not a way I can really truly re-experience all narrative in the game, because while it is expanding, it is not all story in the game. So in some ways, like, you're just better off making another character,
Like, keep your hair like that. That's great.
So, like, it's New Game Plus just didn't give me a lot of inspiration that I want them to remake the entire game from the ground up, separate from the main game. They're already going through like a graphic remaster and everything. So no, I don't think it's really worth the resources for 14.
All right, fair enough. Now we dive into the comment section. We've been having some fun. Y'all been leaving some amazing comments. And so we're going to experience that with you guys right now. I have a ton of comments, and I, we're going to just get through as many as we can today. We'll also, obviously, if you guys have questions, comments, etc., that are going on in the live chat, we will also try and toss those up here as well for it. Our first comment comes from Chili Demon, saying PlayStation Plus Cloud has a ton of Square Enix games in relation to our discussion about like GeForce Now not having any of these Square Enix games. And that to me just kind of iterates that there is some money that is going on behind the scenes, whether it's Sony saying, hey, just have them here and nowhere else, or Square Enix going like, GeForce Now, well, yeah, we'd add these to your platform, but here's what it's going to cost you because your platform subscription benefits from our games. What do you think?
I have no idea how. I don't understand PlayStation Plus well enough. Like, can you help me understand, like, just at a very fundamental level, when I was more active on my PlayStation? So PlayStation 4 was the last PlayStation platform I was really active on. So since then, I have watched Xbox Game Pass move to basically giving them access to, it's beginning to give them access to the Xbox streaming service. So you're getting like xCloud component. It took over the Xbox Live and Gold aspects, which is where you get like a free game every month and you get all sorts of access to social features such as playing games with friends. And then it also became a distribution platform for a Netflix style library of games that updates and constantly gets day one access to all of their first parties. And then gives you a discounted marketplace to any of those things so that should they ever leave that streaming library, you can own it forever. Which like Netflix does not offer the ability to like buy those movies at a discount through Netflix so that when they come off of Netflix, you get to keep them. So how does PlayStation compare to that? Like, before we focus on like what one publisher does with it, I think the number of like PlayStation fanboys that have been telling me how Xbox is like losing, and then if Starfield's not great, like all of Xbox has to shut down lately. I'm struggling to understand what it is that I'm missing, because I must be missing something, because I just didn't think that Sony was keeping up when it comes to PlayStation Plus compared to Xbox.
I think the core difference is in almost kind of like you think about how Nintendo has carved out their thing, where PlayStation is about selling the PlayStation. I mean, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. That's how the industry is run. Xbox is about selling its kind of brand and its service, Game Pass, where they have a console, but it isn't required. You can still play on your PC. And I would advocate that I would love to see them continue to release games also on PlayStation. I think player choice is pivotal. I'm going to advocate for that until I'm dead, because I think that is a more important aspect. I have a phone. it plays games. If I also have an Android phone, it plays same games. And they're not like, you got to go buy an iPhone for this game. Like that in and of itself, is kind of where I come from. I get that there's differences in those arguments for sure, because you're, like you want to sell the PlayStation. It's not a phone. It's not also super multi-purpose, even though in the past, Sony has tried to branch it out and label it as a PC as opposed to like a gaming device. I think that was the PS3 era where it's
PS3 wanted to be this whole mobile home. It's like, well, I should be watching TV through this thing, basically. Like, why am I not ordering my groceries through it? Like, it felt like that's where they wanted it to go. It didn't start out with all those features, but it felt like they described that. And then, like, obviously, based on the way the PlayStation 4 launched, it feels like they kind of backpedaled on some of that. Which Xbox did it with the, not that generation, so not with the Xbox 360, but the Xbox One had a lot of, so like clearly Xbox looked at the PlayStation 3 and goes, oh crap, should we be doing that? Because the Xbox One did offer, back when you could like speak to it and dance in front of it or whatever to like turn it on and turn it off, and it's like, oh, well, I should be running my DVD player through my Xbox, which was like a real thing. I had a friend doing that. They're running their DVD player through their Xbox. It's like, isn't your Xbox a DVD player? Like I don't understand why that step's ever necessary. Like, if you really like a DVD player better than the Xbox, why would you want to bring the Xbox into the equation? And if you don't, can't your Xbox play discs? But yeah, like, the idea that you would like run your sound system through your Xbox and then your TV would feed into your Xbox and it would feed it onto the sound system was like this whole concept. And like, I think PlayStation was the ones that were pioneering that. That just didn't end up being where we wanted it to go.
Yeah, well, with the invention of smart TVs, those are basically all the features that they were adding have shifted to your TV already has those apps and already has all these things. So you're not like using a console to connect to those things anymore, at least with the smart TV generation. Prior to that, yeah, you go get a box or a device or something. I think when a big deck. Yeah. What's interesting, because I see chat going off, because PlayStation, especially Plus, that has a couple of different variations. They do offer it like a wide catalog, but unlike what Xbox Game Pass does, their games aren't like day and date in that as a service, because they're also still interested in selling those games, even though it does seem like they're adding those in. What I've talked to like Chili and a couple of people about specifically is the thing that I'm looking for is a PS5 in the cloud. Now, I do have, and thanks to this amazing community, have my own PS5. It is right here under my desk. I'm ready to rock and roll Final Fantasy 16 when my physical collector's edition gets here in, I guess, a month. And so I'm excited. I'm excited. But I got the digital version because I like digital games. And so I'll probably have a physical version willing just to sell somebody if they want a steelbook cover or whatever of the game itself. But we'll see how that shakes out. I would like still a PS5 in the cloud. Now, my remote streaming, which I've been able to set up on PC, connects right to the PlayStation. So I do have access to my PlayStation in more than one location, which solves the need. And then I just want to see that like evolve. I wouldn't mind renting a PS5 in the cloud, just like I do with Game Pass, if I'm able to access my games everywhere and not necessarily have to worry about a physical piece of hardware, especially as a parent. One of the things that is very clear is that hardware can have a tendency to break, and it does. And so for like parents out there, I think they feel my pain. For those of you who do not have children running around destroying your things that are expensive, I can see how you still want a physical thing here. But the more things that are not able to be dropped in a tub, the better in my perspective. But that's just where I'm coming from. I know it's not for everybody, but I'm excited to see PlayStation Plus Cloud having the Square-Enix games as well. I would still think that GeForce Now, whatever it is, pony up the money, get them added to your platform. Xbox is now just bringing their games on GeForce Now. I can play Gears 5, and they got more games to come. So I'm really excited to see how that decides to roll itself out. Any other thoughts on this comment?
No, I just wanted to understand kind of the basis of like what PlayStation Cloud really was relative to this space. Square-Enix games going to the cloud is great. I'm against, just as a generalized concept, I'm against AAA publishers getting locked down to any one platform for anything. So like, I would love to see with that, all those same Square-Enix games go to xCloud and go to GeForce Now. And like, I just think more games in more places is better. And so, I get that first parties exist for the purpose of selling first party console and services, but I don't know why companies like Square-Enix are helping sell PlayStations, like, as opposed to just saying, we just want more gamers in general. Like, I don't know why they're locked into that specifically, but
Yeah. And as a final thing,
but
just
as
to
a general
confirm, yeah.
basis, more games and more places is better. So like, this is a great first step. I would just love to see it keep going.
And just to confirm for any other parents out there, Nephron says that as a parent of 3, having things that aren't physical is much better. Lost too many physical copies of DVDs games because children are destructive. So shout out to the fellow, procreators out there who feel my pain and Nev's pain for sure. Now, all right, we got more time for comments. So let's jump into the next one. Audiolab 1 says, it's funny because Final Fantasy 14 on PC is ran on Windows, which is basically Microsoft. So I don't see the Xbox regulations. These games and these game developers are so greedy that they don't respect player base. They just care about their money and being a monopoly on the business. And this is obviously in relation to Final Fantasy 14 not on Xbox being one of the few games that is excluded from that platform. What are your thoughts?
I think Sony is cutting them a check to be exclusive, and I think that Square-Enix sees the growth in going to multiple platforms and has probably asked Microsoft to at least make up for part of, if not all of that check. And Xbox is like, no, like that's the only logical way that it plays out in my mind. Like, that's what it feels like has to be happening. Otherwise, I don't see why it's not. It doesn't make any sense to me that it's not. It doesn't make any sense to me that it's not on Xbox. Like, I get why when they were busy trying to update for the PS5 that they're like, hey, right now it's not the right time. But like, I would hope that during this next FanFest series, we would see something about them coming to Xbox for the post-Endwalker generation.
Mm-hmm. Now, while Windows and is what is run on Xbox, it's, like, it isn't a big stretch. It isn't essentially a massive leap. That's why we saw Final Fantasy XI easily ported to the Xbox 360 because of the kind of the core shared base. It isn't a right click and publish to Xbox. It's not like that aspect. And when I'm going to push back on Audiolab's comment about greedy devs, I think it's perfectly fine to have a value proposition. I think it's perfectly fine to say, this is what it costs. We know that, Square-Enix games don't sell as well on your platform. Make it up to us. Make it worth our time because we bring that level of value. But when you constantly don't incentivize that relationship, I think you're only kind of dooming yourself down the line. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here and now. A lot of people push back on, because yes, Final Fantasy 16 is on PS5 and Sony ponied up devs to help with that. You're telling me Microsoft couldn't do the same? You're telling me that couldn't be in a service that they offer? Well, no, that could have easily been a service they offer. Why aren't they offering that? Why aren't they willing to go that extra mile? The good news about 16 is we know it's going to come to PC. My concern has always been for players who don't have a PS5, can't afford, like, it is a tax, right? Like, it's called a hype tax. If you don't have a PS5, you're getting one. You guys provided one for me, but I was more than saving up the money for it. So I was more than willing to invest the $900 in Final Fantasy 16 because I was going to splurge a little bit and because my daughter didn't need to end up in the ICU. If she ended up in the ICU, completely different story. I've had those ICU bills before and that's just the way of life. So everything was great with the pregnancy. Everything was great with the delivery. Everything was great, had a little extra cash. And then you guys made it even easier by giving me a PS5. So not everybody is me. And I want to acknowledge that, like, blessing that you guys have been on my life for this. But I don't view Square-Enix as greedy. I think that they are smart and they have a value product. And when it comes to market, I just wonder, why aren't people more or less willing to write that check? Unless that check from Sony is so effing huge that it's a part of that huge check is you have to sit here and say no to other platforms, of which then I get frustrated. And I think it's okay to be frustrated. I get to experience 16. I'm excited about that. Both things can be true at the same time.
Don't know if either side's being greedy, right? Like
Right.
They could both be asking for reasonable numbers. It could be that one side offered a reasonable number and the other side came back with something ridiculous, but we don't know which way that came. Square Enix could say, hey, I think Final Fantasy 14 is going to cost us X $100,000 in the first year of operation. So we either need some dev resources or a check so that we can bring on our own dev resources or something from you to help us onboard this. And Microsoft could have said, no, you should be paying us. In which case, like, Microsoft is the jerk. The other side of it is Microsoft could have come in and said, like, hey, we're willing to help onboard you. And they could be like, well, Sony's offering us $9 bajillion to not be on your platform. In which case, Sony's just stopping it, just to stop it. Like they're just stopping it to stop it.
Yeah.
In which case, Sony's the jerk. Or it could be that Sony says, "Hey, we're willing to help you with dev resources," and Microsoft's like, "We're willing to help you with dev resources," and Square-Enix like, "Yeah, but you should probably pay for all of it." In which case, Square-Enix is a jerk. So like, we don't have that information. That's not done publicly. Publicly, Sony says we just want game developers to be happy and gamers to be happy, and of course we treat our first parties a little bit differently, but we have nothing to do with third parties. And Square-Enix comes out and Yoshi P says there's nothing stopping us from being on Xbox, and we want to be as many places as possible.
Right.
And Xbox comes out and says we want to be the place for as many gamers as possible, and we'd love to have Final Fantasy 14. It's like, okay, but based on everything that's been said, then Sony's okay with it, Xbox okay with it, Square-Enix okay with it. Why haven't we moved forward? So clearly somebody in the room is exaggerating their point, because somebody has driven friction. We just don't know, is that like extreme friction, or is that a little bit of friction on behalf of everybody? Like, is everybody just a little bit of friction? In which case, nobody's really the jerk. It just isn't going to work out.
Right. And we know there's no requirements of Xbox Live. Like all of the barriers to put 14 on Xbox have been removed by Yoshi P's own words, by Phil's own words.
Yes.
And when it comes down to it, then like the one thing that I would say is on Xbox though, is that Yoshi P has talked about the release versions for the platforms, and everything it requires more testing. And I can attribute to that from a development perspective. Releasing on more platforms requires more resources, more testing. And I've always advocated that if that's the problem, that is a problem that is fixed with the check. And I think that's a problem that with the fact that it was Microsoft. Microsoft was to blame for the reason Xbox did not have 14 at first, due to their wild strategies and requirements. And this was before Phil took over, and Phil has since broken down those barriers. I think that should be a check, that kind of like a real true apology check in this regards. If that was the last barrier, if it's just taking money to making sure that they have the resources they need so that they can release on time. Because if they were to put it on Xbox, then all of a sudden now they're talking about a 5-month patch schedule or whatnot, then I don't think 14 benefits from that at all. That would be a net loss, and I would absolutely support Yoshi P's decision because of that aspect. But I still think that's a problem solved with money, and the question ends up being, is it a problem that's being created? Is that delay created with money as well? One of the things that we will truly never know. All right, that brings us to the end of today's show. Now, I think due to your week and due to the raids and what you got coming up, we're going to shoot for Friday. I do need to confirm with Jules if that is something that works, because we have been doing the Monday, Tuesday thing, but tomorrow is patch day. I will be covering the Blue Protocol news over on Blue Protocol Central for the y'all who are interested in following that game. So if you're part of the Discord, you'll get the ping. If you're not, consider joining in. But that's kind of what our tentative schedule is for this week. Chris, you got any other thoughts you want to share before we wrap up today's show?
No, feel free to hang out all week. We're going to be clearing all the normal stuff this week, focusing a lot on getting to know those normal raids as best as possible, so that when Savage drops next Tuesday, I can get a clear week 1. So it's kind of the beginning of a 2-week sprint there. I don't think servers are offline today. I think it was just like a 3 or 4 hour maintenance, so pretty light maintenance on the patch. So hopefully those of you that are enjoying the last of the Moogle Tombstone event remember that with the next Moogle Tombstone event, with the hunt for Genesis, I believe, is next. That'll be 29 days out from patch 6.5. So 6.5, we start the countdown for. You can basically say it's right at 4 months from 6.4. And in between, we will have 2 live letters at least, because we could end up with a third, depending on what they end up deciding to call things coming out of FanFest. Yeah, exciting. It's going to be big. Should be a great week.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up for today. Chris will be live tomorrow morning, bright and early. So hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thanks so much for joining us. If you like this show, be sure to like it over on YouTube. If you like the highlights, be sure to do that too. And we'll have those being rolling out for you guys this week as well. So that's going to be it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm going to go ahead and end broadcast. And it's actually going to end us on both platforms. So we will see you guys next time.